So, with me being busy with preparing 3GX, and of course Owen being away, I'm pre-recording stuff, but somehow it's all tying in amazingly. So, today's topic is actually my very first video game that I ever played. In terms of, I played games with friends over at their houses, but I'm talking about the very first game that I owned, that I absolutely loved the crap out of. Technically, that game would be Robot Wars Arenas of Destruction, because I was a huge Robot Wars fan, but I couldn't have loved it that much because I gave it away. But then I did buy it back again eventually because I realised I really shouldn't have traded it in. Because like the trade-in value for it was like 14 pence or something. That was how shysty the companies were. Because they were selling it on for about a tenner. It's like, wow, you really want stupid margins, don't you? So, now this isn't the actual copy. I can't find it. It is somewhere in here because I haven't lost it. But I did buy a second copy of it because I managed to get a couple of years. I think it was like no, it must have. Was it last year or was it 2 years ago? Either way, I got two PS1s, the new model of the PSX that came out like 15 years ago. I got two of them for £1 each. And there's pretty much nothing wrong with them, so jobs are good. I mean, the controllers are a bit wonky, but the fact that, you know, PS1 controllers are more readily available. I'm not sure whether the PS2 controllers would work in it as well, considering their dual shock. Not entirely sure. Either way. I think this was the first game I got. Now that I'm thinking about it, it probably might not be, but who cares? Given that this week sees the release of the latest installment of this game, we're going to talk FIFA 98 Road to the World Cup. Now, as I say, the disc isn't in here because it's still in the sleeve because I keep it as like a travel pack, which I constantly sort of go back to anyway, even though I'm not travelling. So, the whole deal that why I wanted this was mainly because it was a FIFA game, and I've been into football, soccer, whatever you want to call it, ever since probably, I can't exactly say when I was born, but ever since I've been around, for quite a while, let's say. It may or may not be all of my 26 and something years, but, yeah, the added thing that really gripped me with this, though, was the fact that I don't think I even bought it originally like brand new. It was, they just had, I guess, tons and tons of platinum copies. A cash and carry that I used to go to because they don't sell entertainment stuff now. They used to. And they had a whole plethora of games from, you know, they even had, like, demo stations, which in most cases was just TVs with the consoles plugged in. They did have a fancy sort of PlayStation actually stand, which, if that still exists, that would probably be worth quite a lot. But, yeah, FIFA 98, it intrigued me, because of the whole blurb that was said on the back, which was the key thing is the only goal is to qualify. Pick from 172 nations and take your team all the way to France 98. So yeah, the added sort of incentive was, the added incentive was, it's not just national stuff, it's also international stuff. And yeah, I'm just looking through because I'm having to remember what nations are in it, because the thing that I always liked was basically, because I think with the game you could control up to 8 teams, which was sort of an added sort of feature, which was pretty nice. And obviously, for certain leagues, because they also did, rather than international stuff, they did national leagues. The Scottish League at that time was only 10 teams. So literally, you could just choose 8 of the teams, 2 of which were like the 2 most likely to win, because they practically always win the Scottish Premier League, at least they did then. In fact, I think, actually come to think of it, Celtic and Rangers have, I think, won the title every year since, like, 1990, I think. It's always been either Rangers or Celtic winning. Obviously, it's been Celtic for the last few years because Rangers haven't been up there. But, sometimes just trying to just get a cheap sort of victory, if I was bored, I'd literally just choose 8 to 10 teams. And then there was an ability in these in the older games, certainly on the PS1. I think certainly you could do it in FIFA 2000 as well. Was to simulate the games. So all I'd do is simulate to the end of the season, and it would gradually do all the matches. And then the video packages would be like, oh, well, this person can't win the title anymore. You know, they're out of contention for being champions. There was no relegation because they didn't have enough leagues and whatever, which I guess was sort of acceptable for the time, but in nowadays it's like, seriously, there's enough room to make a lot of leagues. I mean, I think it went up to, I think it was FIFA, even FIFA 04 had the Football League system in the UK of all 92 clubs that are in there, rather than just the Premier League of 20. And you could even do that with the international teams, though, in the World to World Cup mode, if you can even call it that. And the one thing I did always like to try and do, because obviously with qualification, there is 6 divisions. There's the South American one, North and Central America, Europe, Africa, Asia, and Oceania, which I guess you could call Australasia. Which, you know, nowadays Australia is in the Asian Confederation, mainly because every time they kept doing qualifying from the Oceania region, Australia would always win. And the fact of the matter is, let's compare it to NFL. Australia was an NFL team. All the other nations, like New Zealand, Tahiti, Fiji, and all that, are at best college teams. There is a vast difference. It would make more sense for the vast country to be in the Asian League, where there are other countries that are also vast, and actually give one of the smaller nations more of an opportunity to actually reach, the biggest stage in world football/soccer. Now, the one thing I liked with this is, because it had 172 nations, it was literally like, take your pick on terms of who is actually in there. So with the South American stuff, even if you chose Brazil and France, as technically they already qualify, but the game made sure you didn't try and chicken out of this. So basically they sub Brazil for another South American team, or France for another European team, and you still had to play through the qualifying group, whichever you were in. All these groups, obviously, because this game came out in '97, by the time that most of these groups had been finalised, or at least with the basis of the how it was drawn out. Like here for CONCACAF, you've got the round 1 teams, which is only 4 matches. Then the winners of those 4 go into the second round with various other teams. Then the winners of those go into the third round with 4 other teams playing each other. And then they go into the groups where you've already got the teams, like, you know, you got US and Costa Rica there in Group 1. Sorry if you can't read it, that's what I'm trying to say. Mexico and Honduras in Group 3. And Canada, El Salvador in Group 2, along with the others. Yeah, they already knew all that. Like, you know, Guinea versus Guinea-Bissau in the African Federation. They had all this basis already set out, so they already sort of knew. They didn't know what the results was, because if you try and sim them, it won't be the same results every time. It won't be accurate to what actually happened on the, you know, in the games. Because some of these games like start as they would in the actual seasons. I think the very first qualifier in this is like June or July 1996, which is a full 2 years before the tournament actually happens. So, you know, crazy. But the fact of the matter is, you could see, you know, nations you'd never... This, for me, I actually drew it out as a kid. I must have gone into an encyclopedia, because this was before I had the net, and literally drew every single flag. So I had it on like 3 or 4 sheets of A4, which was complicated for ones like Nepal, because Nepal obviously is the sort of flag with 2 triangles on it, so it doesn't actually, it's not the usual rectangle shape. So that's, you know, it was a bit confusing to sort of draw in the thing, but either way, I actually learned quite a lot of my geography from that, because I will always remember countries like Vanuatu and Fiji and the Solomon Islands and Papua New Guinea and I think it was the Melanesian Islands. I'm just looking because I want to be accurate. Yeah, it doesn't even actually say. So, wow, I needed to write this down. But you know, some of the small nations like that, even with South America, when you had like Grenada and Guyana and St. Kitts and Nevis and the Cayman Islands, St. Vincent, I never knew they existed. You know where the first time I heard that they existed? FIFA 98. So technically this was also educational, I guess. You can tell by the way I'm talking about it, where I'm just endlessly obsessing over it, that I love this game. I still play it now. Yeah, graphics obviously rubbish. Some of the bits with the commentary though is pretty awesome. At least with the English version, because there is a way that you can change the language in the game to actually get like the Spanish and the Italian ones. It's not as vast as the like database of obviously lines that they'd have now for a PS4 game. But some of the things that would be said was ridiculous. There was even a hidden feature where if you scored or conceded a goal, if you press the face buttons, at least with the PlayStation version, the crowd would either like there'd be like air horns going off or cheering and chanting, or if you were if you'd conceded the goal, you could mash the buttons and there'd be a load of booing and hissing and whistling as if to go, "Whoa, we don't like you," sort of thing. And then there was even an ability to actually edit teams and players. You could edit stats. So if you had your favourite player and you were like, I want to make him the best player in the game, you could edit the stats. I think you had to possibly add a cheat to actually get these, but you could have it so it was like 99 stats. You could even do, as accurate as you could, transfers. Because clubs, obviously not nations, but clubs had budgets. And you obviously had to live within the means of your budget. But the idea was, you know, you could get a really, really young Thierry Henry, you know, before he became like really big 3 or 4 years later, and pick him up for cheap. And it obviously wouldn't progress because it would only be the one season. I think it was like a maximum of 200 players could be moved from one club to another. I don't think there was an ability to actually move it from one club to another and then to another. I'm not sure how it worked like that because, you know, it's years ago, but I've actually gone into that mode because most of the time now I just crack up the old save file, because the idea was as well with the Road to World Cup, when you qualified for the World Cup, you then played the World Cup. It wouldn't be accurate because it wouldn't actually be the real teams, because as of the time of making the game, they basically didn't know half of the teams that would actually make it in there. So like teams like Portugal that sensationally missed out in '98 could technically still be in. But then when you got past the group stages of the World Cup, there was like the final round when it was the last 16 into the Elite 8, into the Final 4, into the Grand Final sort of deal, like with NBA playoffs sort of deal, or college basketball, how that goes with the Elite 8. I don't know what the thing is for 16. The Sweet 16? No, I don't know. But then that would unlock as well, and sometimes it was just interesting. You could even edit the club. You could turn Manchester United into, AFC Ashley and make it your team and change the strip, change what stadium you played at. That was the only drawback really for back then as well. And this sort of expressed itself in the fact that it was very much an international-based sort of game. The only stadiums you could play at were national stadiums. When you played it in the league system, and when you played it in terms of league matches rather than international stuff, they were just changed to like Stadium 1, Stadium 2. But if you manage to keep track of the numbers, because it gives you the max attendance and the record attendance ever, when you saw that one of the stadiums could hold 110, like Stadium 6 or something, could hold 110,000 people, and the record attendance was like 150,000, you know that's the Brazil Stadium. Because that is supposedly the largest crowd ever for any sort of football match ever, when 150,000 people crammed, probably illegally, into the Maracanã Stadium for, I think it was some sort of league match in like the 50s. But it was big, giant. And it was various things like that, and if you looked at the design of the thing, it was like, well, that looks like the old Wembley Stadium with a tower, so that's probably it. The best bit was not every country had a local stadium. It was basically just the one that was sort of the nearest in your region. So if it was like Australia versus the Solomon Islands, let's say, and Solomon Islands were the home team, guess where the nearest stadium was? Australia. That would be like the default, right, you're playing there. The thing is, you could actually change the stadium. So the brilliant thing is, and this sort of happens now, because with the last set of internationals that happened a few weeks back, you had like Argentina versus Bolivia in Texas. USA, Texas. Not sort of like Texas in Argentina or anything. There's been other times when it's like we've had Brazil versus Russia in London at one of the stadiums. Basically because of where the players are based. So even back then, you could say, possibly, in 97, they envisioned that you could have crazy matches not in the stadiums they're intended. You don't want Argentina playing at home on Argentinian soil? Fine. Move their game to South Africa. Or Cameroon. Or Trinidad and Tobago. There was about, 30 stadium, and the great thing was they also had sort of like their own video package, sort of encompassing. Or no, I'm getting that confused with the actual World Cup game, because that was obviously run on the same engine. It was very similar. The thing about the World Cup game itself, when it came out, there was like a classics mode where you could play, I think, every single final from 1930 through to, I think it stopped at 94. I'm not sure, it might have stopped at 1990. But, and the commentary was done by a different person who is a legend in terms of British commentary, commentated on the 66 England World Cup. That's where most British people will know him from. But yeah, it's really fun. It still is fun to me now. And that's the other one. In a friendly, you couldn't do this in an international or a league. But if you did like a one-on-one friendly with your friends, and I guess this is sort of carried over from the original FIFA game back in '94 on like the Mega Drive, or '93, I guess it would have been, because the game was actually called FIFA '94. There was an indoor stadium where it was 5-a-side, with one of the 5 being a goalkeeper, and it was like supposed to be. It sort of looked like, part of it looked like Cheers, because it sort of looked like just like it was in a bar somewhere. It was like some of those early Rocky fights where he just shows up in a bar. It looked more like a David Letterman, Stephen Colbert studio. It didn't look right. Plus, there was like glass perspex walls up like it was an ice hockey rink, because obviously, and the ball, despite how they actually metered it, so the like goal kicks done by the goalkeeper, rather than going to the half, because in the equivalent of indoor football, a goal kick from a goalkeeper would probably go over the fence and whatever, out of probably, if you kicked it hard enough, probably would even go out of the building. But they scaled it down to where it basically kicks to the halfway line equivalent of the actual the indoor stadium, and that was just weird. Like 5-a-side, get stuck in the corner, and so it sort of was a little bit. The goal was smaller. It was more like a hockey goal, as in field hockey rather than ice hockey. It was more like a hockey goal, and like if you kicked the ball and it missed, it wouldn't go off the post. It would just bounce off the wall, and it's like basically like pinball, and like crazy, and oh man, I had some fun with that, as you can probably tell. This is what you get when I get blocks of content. I just reminisce. That's what that basically is. Oh, still haven't worked out what the title's going to be for this video. Probably will eventually. But, yeah, that was FIFA 98 with Beckham on the cover. I don't know who was on the cover internationally. Probably somebody to do with Major League Soccer when it was in its infancy back then. Next time, and somewhat of a tease, I guess if you can call it that, we need to celebrate a birthday. And I don't think it's Owen's. It certainly isn't mine. But it may be something that I just talked about. And no, not FIFA. Because welcome to the power PlayStation.